23 weeks out from the Tampa Pro. Welcome everybody. This will be my prep series as I prepare for the Tampa Pro. It's August 4th or 5th, right around there. Also planning to do the Texas Pro, which is 2 weeks later. So this will be 23 and 25 weeks out. And there's a question mark around maybe being 21 weeks out for the Chicago Pro. So what am I doing? Am I doing open? Am I doing 212? These are the questions that I get, and to give some idea around it, for one, I'm gonna see where just truly this best look falls, because I feel like I'm probably gonna be in this in-between ground where I could probably pull down to make 212, but also I might be sacrificing some of the look. So I'll see where I kind of land at. Like within this past off season, I came up to a body weight high of 262. The past 6 weeks, I've been in this holding phase. So just kind of maintaining around that body weight, pulling PED'S down to a low amount, bringing food down to a baseline amount, keeping that, try to maintain that body weight and gym performance before prep starts. And I pretty much maintained kind of floating around this 259, 260. And the last week, we removed our untracked, kind of our cheat meal for the week, and ended up starting prep right around 257. So when I look at my visuals and posing, this is the most conditioned I've been at this body weight, and also the heaviest I've been at the start of a prep. So it's a bit of newer territory for me. Where I see body weight potentially going, because I think I might be somewhere in this maybe 16, 17% body fat area. That might land me in the high teens, 219, 218. Maybe it could be heavier. Maybe it could, but in that weight cap, it's like you're real close to cut to 212. But at the same time, you have to remember that might be weighing in the afternoon. So that might be have to be a bigger cut, but also filled out like at 219, that might be the best being on stage at like 222. So that's where I have some options here for the show that I'm picking. Idea being if at 21 weeks out, I get to Chicago and I'm ready to go, I could do the open, then I could cut down farther and do a 212 show. So where I can kind of do both this year. And that might be the last year that I can actually do this. So that's why there's options present. So we are gonna go through a push workout today. I kind of walk you through that. But just to give you an update on how I just executed this prep and what are my first transitions that I'm doing into it. For one, cardio's already been in place 4 days per week for 20 minutes. I walk on the treadmill. I was doing like a 6% incline, 2.8 miles per hour. So I did increase that initially, going to 5 sessions a week, 25 minutes, 8% incline, and also 3 miles per hour. And I've been tracking just heart rate to make sure effort level uphold. I'm trying to get between 110 to 120 beats per minute during cardio, using like just an Apple Watch to track a lot of this data. So at that rate, I'll average around that heart rate. So did an initial like cardio increase. Also step count has been averaging 8,000 steps per day. So I increased that to 10,000. So I had some initial just easy output increases. What I was initially going with, since like removing the treat meal and all, you see weight come down a little bit, was not as aggressive of a pull this week. I was doing about a 20% total calorie deficit, which that was about a 900 calorie change I need to make. So about 200 is maybe from cardio. And I say maybe because that stuff, it's hard to be real accurate with the exact numbers around that. But then the other 700 calories were from a food drop. And so I was around 4,300 calories maintaining that. So now the diet has come down to 3,700 calories, which on training days, it's 320 grams of protein, 450 grams of carbs, and 70 grams of fat. On my non-train days, basically those other macros stay the same. I dropped about 3,000 calories, but all of it is pulled from carbohydrate, which it's like 300 grams of carbohydrate. So together, the output and the diet side made about a 900 calorie deficit. So that should get me moving pretty well, along with no longer having that untracked meal during the week. And with the diet change, one thing that I did was 2 of my meals in the off season get pretty close together. My post-workout meal to my next meal. I was eating one meal, go train. I'd have this post-workout meal, then like an hour later it would be the next meal. So what I already changed schedule-wise from like a work productivity standpoint, but also just being my best to train and prep, is getting 2 meals in, go train, than having one meal after training and then 2 more meals. So I just cut out that post-workout meal that was really close together, as I could just do larger meals and 5 meals a day, have a bit more fasting time in the morning, like doing cardio, posing, vacuums, all that aspect. 5 meals on prep works really well for me. So those were like some of the initial food adjustments, timing adjustments made going into prep. The last variable to kind of address too is PEDs. And if you jump into J3U, like I'll go deep in depth on like exactly my whole layout, but just I wanted more like the framework of like where I'm going with things. So like when I was, pushing for size, eventually that peak anabolic load, androgen load was just a little over 2,000 milligrams per week, around 7 IUs of growth hormone and some other ancillaries like along with just to support like health metrics and things like that. During the hold phase, that came down to 400 milligrams per week and 3 IUs of growth hormone. So coming into prep, knowing what I would need to build muscle, I know I can get away with using less just to maintain tissue, especially when body fat's higher and it's not going to be as promoting of muscle loss in this early on phase. So I'll just escalate up right now. So just adding a little bit more in. Eventually I hit a peak dose farther along the lines of prep when there's more of a potential for muscle loss, and growth hormone comes up a little bit initially as well. So easy fat loss, take it. Easy muscle retention right now, and so won't be a lot of PEDs that need to be present. And then again, we'll just escalate up week by week until getting into that peak dose, which 16 weeks out we'll probably hit into that, and then maintain that for prep. And the best gauge for this really is gym performance. Like if you're able to maintain gym performance on prep, that's the clear sign that you have plenty of PEDs present if you're an enhanced competitor. And training. Let's get on to training. So that's where my current setup is. I'll update you next week with what happens change-wise. But with train day, so this push session is a slight more shoulder focus. And the total volume within the session is 7 sets of chest, 4 sets of triceps, 4 sets of calves, and 4 sets of side delt. So I have 2 push sessions a week. Basically, the other session is a mirror of this one, except I start with a flat press, and I also have a flat fly. Now, with this session, I do start with calves, and calves are like the neglected muscle group that usually people throw at the end of the session, and they usually don't do enough volume, train them hard enough, and they're like, man, I don't know why my calves just aren't growing. Like I can't figure it out. It's like, well, usually you have so much more volume for chest or triceps or something. You just don't put enough into calves. Also, putting them on at the end of a session when you're already fatigued doesn't give them a chance to give a lot of good quality stimulus to them. So I put them on the front of my push sessions because it doesn't really impact the rest of my session, and it doesn't impact also the next day, which the next day is my pull session. So I'm not doing legs where calves are sore and it's hard to get some ankle flexion going. So I prefer doing these on the leg press just because I can load it really heavy, and also it's very braced, like braced by the hip, kind of like a donkey calf raise, but in a leg press. Essentially, with doing like a standing leg press, you have to potentially like also get your delt in there and shoulder, and then I'm doing push movements, so that's kind of not what I want. And also just more axial loading for more fatigue, when we could just do something like a toe press and really limit that extra loading like throughout the core. So with the toe press, doing 4 sets here, 4 working sets, and they're hard sets, getting near pretty much at failure. What I find with calf training is that I like to keep a soft knee. If you completely lock out your knee, that the gastroc, when it crosses over that hinge joint, it just doesn't have enough to really pull on the back of the femur to give it leverage to actually go into plantar dorsiflexion. So keep that soft knee throughout the movement. That can really help with just keeping the gastroc in it. And with this one, get a deep stretch in your calf training. Go down slow, controlled. That stretch, that stretch under tension is great hypertrophy stimulus. It creates a lot of mechanical tension within the muscle. So make sure you're using those cues in that form when you are training calves. Rep range wise, 10 to 15 reps is what I'm doing on calf training. After calves, I move on to side delts, and I have a preference right now for the Prime lateral machine. It's great because you can actually change the loading pattern. I set it up to where it loads pretty much right off the beginning when the muscle is stretched, where you can create a lot of that mechanical tension within the muscle. And then it lets off at the top when it's already really hard for the delt to contract and finish the movement. So the strength profile can really match the resistance profile set up that way. Also, what I've found, if I use like a lot of cable laterals, dumbbell laterals, that loading, I start to get some issues in the elbow, the wrist extensors. So I can kind of really limit it that way with using something with just has like the pad support. What you'll notice when I'm doing these is that the upper arm stays in the scapular plane. So it's not going directly out to my sides, but just a little bit in front of that plane, maybe 15, 20 degrees to the front, which that puts you in a really good position where the traps have to depress. So you won't necessarily get as much trap involved, but also puts the rotator cuff in a stronger position to stabilize that shoulder. So you have a better ability for the side delt to produce force and contract. Also, if you go right out to your sides, you end up limiting that range of motion. The humerus just starts to kind of max out, and some people get more like joint impingement there too. So moving through the scapular plane can be a really good spot to work the side delt. Now, with these, I do 4 sets. And I don't do a variety of them because there's only so many ways you can train that path of the front delt, especially when you have a muscle that basically it inserts at one point and it does kind of fan out and have some origination point, but this really doesn't change much, that you need all this variety in exercise patterns. So pick a great movement and just do a bunch of sets with that. And then train that frequently. I don't see the point of doing multiple different side delt raises in one day. It starts to make sense just to like spread that volume out throughout the week. So I'll start with side delts because it also doesn't limit any of my pressing. Now, depending on how you're doing them, some people like externally rotate, get more front delt involved. That might limit your pressing. But also I would say like, hey, side delts are put first because this is a priority muscle group, as you just could not be wide enough for most divisions, right? So 4 sets here, 10 to 15 reps, stay within that rep range. From there, moving on to an incline barbell press. I've had these and I've just really enjoyed them from just enjoyment perspective. I was doing the Smith machine, but man, it's always hard to find like the right bar path and your bench is adjusting. I realize it's like a more braced pattern, but there's also something to just having some free weights involved. And I feel like free weight exercises absolutely carry over to your other movements that are more braced. So for one, starting with an incline press, as this is more a upper shelf focused day. I don't do a lot of overhead pressing. Just for me to get in that position is a little bit more challenging. So start with the incline press. Also starting with the free weight first, as I'm the freshest here. So I'm not fatigued trying to do a barbell press at the very end of my workout. And so with this incline press, what I've been doing with it is holding the same load. So I've been up to like 295 and totally weak on pressing, so no judgment there. But what I've been doing is holding that load the same, and then every week working down a little bit deeper to depth to get towards my chest. And this week is where I actually went all the way down to the chest to like find that range and build strength within that range. Like we said, like loading in that deep stretch position creates a lot of tension. It's creates a lot of adaptive stimulus that could be present there. So trying to use the full range of motion that you have access to. So trying to gain access is what I've been doing these weeks. So started with 1 work set, went to 295, got 8 reps. From there, made a 10% load reduction because my working range for these is 8 to 12 reps. So drop load and went down to, I think it was 265 and hit 11 reps. So what I'll do now is just hold those loads and keep working up the rep range. Once I hit the top of the rep range, add 5% load, and then rinse and repeat, keep going up. Moving from there, so I hit incline press, a little bit more front delt emphasis, went on to a hammer strength flat press. So this will be just kind of my overall pec movement. I'm gonna do 2 working sets here. 8 to 12 reps still. With this one, I don't like to confine my torso to what the machine has preset. You should really find like where your best pressing angle is. Just standing, like just contract your pecs, feel where you feel the best contraction. And then you basically need to find the right incline that's gonna allow you to stay in that bar path. So I keep my hips a little bit out, so it's almost getting slight into a decline press. And for me, that's where I can get a lot of great pec tension. And with that one, again, hitting 2 sets, that covers like my compound pressing for the day. What I want to move to next is a fly. So I do want to get some more direct chest work in without having to load as much across the shoulder and also the elbow. And what I put emphasis on today is doing like an incline cable fly, and doing this one because my other day I have a more of a decline flat cable fly there. So kind of putting more volume into like that, again, that upper shelf. Setup on there, I like using military bench. For one, it gives you a little bit more bracing and kind of standardize the movement more. Also, I just kind of, what you want to do is kind of trace those costal and also clavicular fibers down towards the upper arm and kind of line up where that cable is going to cross with that fiber path. And so you'll see like I'm starting a little bit lower and then doing the fly upwards, so it aligns well with the clavicular fibers of the upper pec. Also, what I like to do is trace that cable and make sure it's running directly through the elbow. If you have those things happening, that lines up the line of force with the line of pull of those chest fibers. Now on this movement, I'll do 3 working sets here, 12 to 15 reps, so a little bit higher in rep range, working on a little bit more, get some cell swelling going, a little bit more pump. That wraps up my chest work. So then we're on to direct tricep work. For tricep volume, I only count direct working sets. So when I mentioned earlier 4 sets of triceps, it's only hard working sets of direct tricep work. So I'll start with a push down. I like using prime handles and also the prime bar, so it's adjustable, adjusting it around shoulder width, and then allowing those hands to just move out into extension naturally. So you'll see like I'm not going straight down, because it requires a lot of external rotation of do that. If you don't have a lot of good range to do it, it's okay to just let those arms move out and away from the body. So I like it because it does allow you to line up your own ability to move with the apparatus. Here, again, just 2 sets. My triceps are one that can really take off well with growth, so they don't take a lot of extra volume. I was doing 6 sets in the off season, so just sitting a little bit lower in tricep volume right now, working in that 10 to 15 rep range on the tricep extensions. Next exercise, I do a JM press. Probably seen JM presses done usually in the Smith machine. What I found an issue with doing a JM press in the Smith machine is that it does require you to have a lot of supination to maintain this elbow pointing up towards the sky. So what ends up happening, you get a lot of wrist binding and also elbow binding. And I really want to take that away by just being able to move my wrist more into a neutral position. The dumbbell's nice too, because I can load it right through the shoulder. So now I'm just loading straight through the shoulder. I have that elbow very far away from the line of force, and then moving that elbow through the movement. So you get some good loading in the lengthened position for the elbow. And with that really nice joint angles present, you can really get away from beating up your elbows. So if you have a hard time doing skull crushers, it's usually because the line of force is going straight down. Your elbows are trying to move out this way and do an extension, but instead you're having to move, and eventually it binds, and that's when it can get really awkward to finish off the skull crushers. So doing a JM press, you can kind of circumvent that a little bit. Now, what I will say, it's very easy to muscle these and turn them into a press. So I'd keep them slow and very accurate in going down really slow, controlled, having a pause, making sure you're driving those elbows out to get the good stretch, and then intentionally push the elbows through to press those dumbbells back up. Doing them after I do the extensions, as I can get a little bit more pre-fatigue warmed up on the elbows before doing the JM press. All right, well, that wraps up my push session and my update of going into prep. Again, next week, we'll jump into what was the actual response to all these changes and what should I be doing next and going from there. So if you have questions for me on anything I laid out today, leave them in the comments below. Be happy to answer for you, and we will talk to you next time.